the best conference in college football. Is it going to be the Big Ten in 2024? I think most people would agree that it was the Pac-12. I know SEC fans want to argue and say all of their stuff. Face it, SEC, you didn't have a great year. You might have the best recruiting rankings, but as we saw against Michigan, recruiting rankings don't always result in the win. So, the SEC obviously had a down year. I think the Pac-12 was the best conference this year, but in 2024, the Big Ten is going to be adding four of the best teams in the Pac-12. The Big Ten this year in Power 5 games outside of their conference, they were 9-12. So it wasn't a great year. The SEC was 12-13. Every other team except for the ACC, they were 12-14. The Big 12 and the Pac-12 were the two conferences that had winning records against against Power 5 teams. And other than this game that we just watched with Michigan and Washington, none of these Pac-12 teams coming in lost to a Power 5 team. USC beat Louisville, Oregon beat Texas Tech, Washington, they beat Michigan State, they beat Texas. So we're adding some teams who have really dominated other Power 5 teams. You might say they weren't exactly all on the same level, but I think there's a lot to be excited for with the strength of the conference going into 2024. And if the SEC is not careful, they might just not be the best conference in college football for 2 years in a row. Brant, you had some thoughts on this earlier. So what say you? Will the Big Ten be the best conference in 2024?
Yeah, I think hands down, they will be. It's a top heavy conference right now, with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State being, that top tier. And then you've got a lot of teams that can go out and compete as shown in bowl season. You saw teams like Maryland and Northwestern go out and beat middle tier teams from other conferences, namely the SEC and the Pac-12. But then you go and you add Washington, who was just in the championship, Oregon, whose only two losses were to Washington, USC, who, maybe they're not as sound on the defensive side of the ball, but they've got a coach with a lot of experience. They've got one of the best offensive coaches in college football. A lot of people would say Lincoln Riley is. And then you add UCLA, who I guess Chip Kelly's still under contract there. I know there were a lot of rumors of him potentially being fired, but looks like he might be back for another year. And that's another great football coach with a lot of positive experiences in college football. So you add those four, you're going to stick Washington and Oregon right in that top tier, with Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State. USC is going to be knocking on that door too. UCLA is going to be probably down to that next tier of like an Iowa, maybe Nebraska up there next year. But long answer to the question. Short answer is yes. That's going to be the best conference in football next year. I know the SEC adds Oklahoma and Texas to what they already have, but I just think the Big Ten is going to be deeper.
Washington just beat Texas. So
exactly.
Better add than Texas, right? Gabriel, I'm curious your thoughts. Do you think the Big Ten is going to be the best conference in 2024?
Not only is the Big Ten going to be the best conference in 2024, but they have been, they have been for the past 10, 12 years, I would say, hands down. It's no debate in my mind. For now, with the addition of the four West Coast teams, we're definitely the most national conference, 100%. So we have the most coast to coast viewership, and with that, I think that'll help in recruiting. We now also have the most diversity in terms of teams that have different styles and different approaches. Where the SEC, they're not all the same, obviously, but they're a little more closer than not compared to how the Big Ten is. And so, and then just in terms of the teams in general, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan are going to be up there. And then we have resurging teams that, had a couple off years, but are coming back. Nebraska, laugh now if you want, but we're back. Wisconsin, they've had, under Luke Fickell, they've had some really nice moves. And then you can't discount a Purdue, a Northwestern, another team that could surprise you to go on a run and possibly sneak into this new playoff format. So, and then from the four West Coast teams, I would say I think I like Oregon the best coming in terms of just overall coaching, playmaking ability, offensive firepower. And when I when I say recruiting too, so now we can recruit everywhere. And if you go to Oregon and you're from, say, New York City, okay, my family's gonna have a chance to watch me when we play at Rutgers. Or if you're from the middle of country, that's really where the majority of Big Ten conferences. Or if you're from California and you go to Nebraska, all right, we have a chance my friends can watch me play at UCLA, UCLA or USC. So just in terms of all that, the brand recognition, and all thanks to a financial marketing error. What was it, by $10 million, $20 million, where they overstated? So all thanks to the Pac-12, missing a couple zeros, this beautiful, powerful conference is going to just get that much more strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys both make really good points. Justin, you as optimistic as these two guys about the Big Ten in 2024?
Hear me out. I'm taking a little different angle here because I'm trying to look at it a little more in depth. When thinking about it a little more in depth, look at the game that we watched yesterday. Okay. We saw the clash of styles at the top, like we mentioned, with the Pac-12 versus the Big Ten. Okay. The question that poses to me was because what Washington struggled with the most was the physicality of Michigan. Now, it's easy to look at these teams and the way they're currently structured with the teams they currently play and the conferences they're currently in and just slide them over, right? But there's going to be a transition period. Look at Scott Frost, saying the Big Ten's going to have to adapt to us. And, that wasn't the case. What we saw yesterday is that Big Ten football will beat Pac-12 football, and it will beat them the Big Ten way. And so the Pac-12 is going to have to adjust more than anybody. How long does that adjustment take? Because they're going to have to get bigger and more physical at the line of scrimmage, especially because they're going to get wore down over the course of a Big Ten season. So with offensive lines, especially, it's really hard to build a solid offensive line through the transfer portal. It's not a quick thing because those are a unit, right? The offensive line, more than anything, works as a unit. They need to have that camaraderie. They need to have the cohesiveness. They need to know their quarterback. That just comes in time and experience with those guys. So my question is going to be, can these Oregon, Washington offensive lines come in and succeed in the Big Ten? And also, when they start recruiting the Big Ten talent, are they going to take a step back? As it's probably no different than a coach coming in and implementing his style, and they take a couple steps back while they're recruiting, and then they kind of come to the forefront. Is that process going to take place in the Big Ten? I think the Big 12 teams can transition a little bit better over to the SEC. So I think what it's going to be is, I think overall as a conference, I think the SEC might have more teams in the top 25. But I think the Big Ten is going to have more teams at the top. And that's kind of my take on it. And, I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State sneaks up there if Aller can take, a step. And I like Penn State's team next year. I'd put them above the Oregon and Washington just for the reason I mentioned. I don't know how that transition is going to go. And I think the meshing of the Pac-12 team or the Big 12 teams and to the SEC is going to be a little bit smoother. Long term, though, I think the Big Ten, no doubt.
Yeah. Can I add one quick thing, please?
Yep.
Just to kind of to agree with you, Justin. What we've seen from the SEC is they've transitioned more so to looking and playing like the Big 12 has. And so, just to your point, that would be, for the short term, at least 100% a more seamless transition.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the Big Ten has always been about defense and hard-nosed football, running the ball, and to your credit, Gabriel, we saw LSU and Ole Miss, two teams that were good SEC teams. They weren't top tier, but they were very good, maybe tier 2, tier 3 teams who had high-powered offenses, but I mean, let's face it, those defenses stunk. I mean, they were not good at all, and so we're seeing the SEC transition here a little bit, and I think that the Pac-12 teams are going to get some help coming into the Big Ten, but it's not easy to find linemen in the transfer portal, and they're going to get help from the transfer portal, but a lot of those linemen that you need to play against Big Ten teams, they need to be homegrown, corn-fed boys who, grow up and are strong. And honestly, you just don't get that on the West Coast as much as you do in the Midwest. Schools like Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, those are schools that they get those big guys and they can really make an impact. And I even think Nebraska is recruiting a lot in that way as well. So they're starting to shore up their offensive line and defensive lines as well. So it's going to be an interesting addition to the Big Ten to see how they work out. But let's go rapid fire here a bit, and we'll start with you, Justin. Give me, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe a few less, if you think teams that you think have the best chance to make the playoffs in 2024 from the Big Ten.
I got 4 listed in order: Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon.
Wow. What do you think, Gabriel?
Ditto.
Yeah, exact same. Brant, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to go 3. I'm going to leave Penn State off that list. And just because I don't believe in Drew Aller, and we'll see if he makes me eat my words. I actually haven't looked at their schedule next year, so that's definitely a big thing as well. Just depending on who you draw in the schedule, definitely going to be a huge, just as far as how many wins you're able to rattle off. That's going to definitely affect your ranking, especially with there being 5, 6 really good teams in the Big Ten, and the rest are probably more winnable games for that top tier. But as of right now, I'm sitting at 3.
Yeah, I think Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, those are kind of the big 3. I would not be surprised if Washington catches fire with Will Rogers and can, maybe be a 9-3 team that squeaks into the playoffs. I know they play a few Big Ten teams, but they also play some West Coast teams. And I think the West Coast teams who play at home are going to have a pretty big advantage. And so that's going to help them a lot as well. Some of the travel that some Big Ten teams are going to have to take out there. And that'll be good for them to battle in that way
until the winter time.
Well, yeah, that's true too. Because then they have to face the winter, which I think it's cold up in Washington, right?
Not like the Midwest, bro. It's like 42 in Arizona right now, and I'm freezing.
Yeah, that's true. So, all right. Thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.